For the next couple of slides, I'm going to give you some characteristics of culture. Culture, the first characteristic is culture is not biological. You've heard a lot of definitions of culture, and I don't care if you know any of those definitions word for word, but I want you to know these characteristics. All of the definitions contain all of these characteristics. Culture is not biological. You do not inherit your culture from your DNA. My family, for example, is, I happen to know, or I don't know, it's just been handed down, and then somebody took a blood test and those things aren't that accurate. I'll get into that later. But apparently, supposedly, my family is Welsh and French, which makes sense. Ben, also Welsh, I think you just indicated to yourself, go Wales! I don't have a strong Welsh identity or anything like that, but let's say I did. Let's say I had a really strong Welsh identity and I spoke Welsh and all this stuff. I didn't learn all that or inherit that through my DNA. I got that through culture. It was learned, and we'll talk more about that. So despite all human beings sharing almost identical biology, almost identical DNA, culture is still shapes strictly biological functions. So I'm going to talk a lot about toilets and using toilets for the next 15 minutes in order to prove to you, you might think, all humans have to eat. All humans have to sleep. All humans, every single one of them, has to use a bathroom at some point, defecate, urinate, those kinds of things. But despite the fact that these are biological universals, we all do these things in very, very different ways. So even in our own culture, I have an example here. This is in the past of our own culture. This is a Roman toilet. And I say our culture to mean American culture, which gets its heritage from Europe. I don't mean that it actually represents every single person in this room, because a lot of us aren't Americans. I have to be more careful with my language. But even American Western culture used the toilet very differently not that long ago. Roman history is not that long ago. And so this is a public toilet. There were no private toilets except for the very wealthy at that time. Everybody left their house and went to the public toilet. And you could see people weren't really as squeamish as we were. So there's nothing dividing the various toilets. People sat, hip to hip with other people who were also using the bathroom, something I don't think we would do. And you see these sticks with the sponge on the end. That is a sea sponge. And this is what they would use to wipe. This is what they would use to clean themselves. So it's a sea sponge attached to a stick, and there were only a few sticks per bathroom. So everybody would use the same stick over and over again. When you were done, you sort of put it into this communal bucket that would just be full of salt water or something like that, and then you'd use it over and over again. Sounds really gross. I wouldn't want to do it, but it didn't, readily infect everybody. The civilization did not come to a screeching halt with different diseases because they were all sharing a stick or a sponge, right? So anyway, stuff that we think of as being biological, satisfying these biological bases, we do it in very different ways. Toilet paper, which many of us from the United States feel very uncomfortable using the bathroom without it, was only invented in 1857, and it didn't become widespread even in the United States until relatively recently. Has anybody ever encountered any other kinds of bathroom cultures? Have you ever been to another place in another country where the toilets or the bathroom culture was vastly different or particularly different? Anybody? So here's some bathroom culture I've encountered around the world. Let's start in the bottom right. Can you see my arrow? Bottom right is a typical East Asian toilet in many places. It's about half the toilets you encounter in Korea are like this, but you simply squat on it. And I loved those toilets. So it takes a little while to get used to how to aim and balance yourself so you don't tip over, but you don't touch anything. The cool thing is you go into the bathroom, you don't have to touch the toilet seat. You don't have to flush the toilet because there's a little button on the ground that you just step on and that flushes it. They are awesome. Have you ever been into a really awful public bathroom and it looks like everything's wet, like every single surface in the whole bathroom's wet for no reason? You're like, I want to get out of here. Well, here it's a lot better and hygienic. But you'll notice also they have this garbage can right here. This little garbage can is actually all of the toilet paper because the plumbing was developed in South Korea in a very sort of haphazard way after the Korean War. And so you can't flush toilet paper. And that's true in a lot of countries around the world. So you have to put the toilet paper there. And so sometimes it gets pretty stinky. That would be a turnoff for a lot of Americans. Has anybody encountered one of these Japanese toilets? So they have very different, they don't tend to use pit toilets as often as Korea, squatty toilets, but they do have them. But you'll notice that up here, it's kind of cut off, but this is actually the hand washing sink. So when you wash your hands, the water that you wouldn't want to drink or anything after that can be used to flush. They're very eco-friendly that way. That's also what's going on in this toilet up here, except the shower too also drains into the tank for the toilet. So you use water that they're not using as much water that you could potentially drink to flush. They're using what they call gray water, what many people call gray water. But I want to pull your attention to this little guy. This little guy in public toilets, this is like a $300 or $400 toilet seat. It's very expensive, and it's still in public bathrooms because they also don't really use toilet paper very much. They're more eco-conscious. So this is a bidet. It shoots water up at you to clean you, but you can select with this little guy, you can select the temperature of the water that you're sprayed with. You can select the speed at which the water pulsates or does not pulsate. You can select little music that it will play. So when you're in a public restroom, everybody doesn't hear the plop, plop, or whatever. It'll play different sounds. You can adjust the volume. You can play different whatever song you want to play. It's like, maybe not that song, but it'll play songs. You can also select the temperature of the air that it will use to sort of dry you off afterward. There's all this different selection. And it's just something that we are certainly not used to in our homes, but also we're not used to being pampered that much in a public restroom. We're like, that's like the last place you ever want to use the bathroom, right? In the United States, but they're clean and nice in Japan. How about this one? Any guesses on what's going on with this toilet? Random guesses so I can drink coffee? Help your teacher with a sore throat out? No, he wants to help. That's okay.
I was gonna say it looks similar to like the Korean floor toilet. It's kind of like ribbed. I don't think it like that lid comes up. I think you stand on it and
You do.
squat.
That's exactly right. So this is a hybrid toilet. They have it in India quite a bit because a lot of people in India are from the countryside and they'll travel to the cities where they're more used to a Western style toilet that you sit on. But in the countryside, they use the pit toilets. And what was happening was the country folk were, I don't know why I use the folk for country people. Sorry, I don't mean it that way. People from rural areas of India would come to city areas and they would squat on a Western style toilet that was not made for that. And the toilet would break, cause injury, people would hurt themselves, it's expensive. And so they started just putting in these sort of hybrid toilets that you could either sit down on in the Western style or you could squat on top of. So again, yes, eating, sleeping, and defecating are universals to all human beings. How each is done and the meaning given to each varies widely around the world. So do we have toilet culture? Absolutely we do. And we're going to learn about it by playing a silly urinal game.